And what happens in most middle school teams, high school teams in America, you have coaches yelling at players to get lower, play lower. Little Johnny can't. You think he's not trying? He doesn't possess the stability or coordination or whatever it is to get lower. And so you yelling louder is not going to get him to play lower, right? So that's where it comes. All right, now we might have to take him in the weight room, get him a little bit stronger. Stability issue, work stability. If it's a single, whatever it is, we'll get him stronger and more stable. But yelling at him to get wider and low, so what I want you to get a little wider than you're comfortable being right now. I want you to get down, chest proud, and now let's just keep them in that position. And what are we doing? We're doing an isometric hold, right? Now we can work some, dribbling into that, whether, whatever we're doing with the ball, doesn't really matter. But let's get him to hold that position to the best of his ability, not yell at him to get lower and lower. Just get a little bit wider and let's hold that position. And just stay with that. And we're going to do that every time you come in the door. We're going to get you in that wide, low basketball stance. And sooner than later, you're going to be moving and going through your legs and, driving by people in that wide and low stance.
That was athletic performance and basketball skills coach Bobby Whyte. You're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our longtime sponsor, Simply Faster. There are a lot of sports technology companies out there, but Simply Faster is the only website you can go to that features an online store that covers the bandwidth of training technology, from force plates to timing systems to muscle stimulators and more. Some products of Simply Faster that I use and love include things like the Freelap timing system in K-Box or coach's favorites such as GymAware. Recently, Simply Faster has added 2 units that as a coach you should definitely take a look at. The first is the Muscle Lab Contact Grid, which is an extremely affordable and portable, step-by-step, literally, system to collect data on jumps, bounds, sprints, agility, hurdle hops, and really as much as your creative mind can imagine. In what used to take a whole runway worth of data collecting strips, the Contact Grid does it all with only 2 small strips that together cover up to 40 meters of sprinting. Ground contact time, step rates, rhythms, and beyond are at your fingertips with this device. Another new unit, the VO2 Master, is an ultra-portable gas exchange analyzer. Don't guess on energy system development when you can get direct insight into VO2 capabilities in relation to specific sports skills, rather than being hooked up to tubes on a treadmill or worse yet, a cycle ergometer to get a VO2 max. Think of the VO2 Master as your own gas exchange lab without the tubes and wires. Deepen your analysis in the specific conditioning preparation of your athletes with the VO2 Master today. These products and incredible customer service make Simply Faster your go-to for your sports technology needs. I'm happy to have partnered with them in sponsoring this podcast. Their support has been tremendous, so check them out today at simplyfaster.com. That's simply with an I, faster.com. Welcome to episode 178 of the Just Fly Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Joel Smith. Thanks for being here today. On the show, we have Bobby Whyte. Bobby is an athletic performance and basketball skill enhancement coach, and he's based out of northern New Jersey. Bobby has worked with athletes ranging from beginner to NBA, NFL, overseas professionals. He works with many of the best basketball players in the country. He spent time in China as the head strength coach for the Guangxi Rhinos. Bobby's story is inspirational. He overcame severe struggles in his early 20s, turned his life around, and is now a top-level both skills and conditioning and performance coach. And his story really is the epitome of going through the deepest valley to reach the highest mountain. And the whole first portion of this show, you can hear the passion, you can hear the inspiration, you can hear just how profound of an impact Bobby is having, not only on the skill or strength outcomes in his athletes, but also just an impact on them as a person. And it's awesome to sit down and talk to a coach who cares so much, not only about an athlete's success, but more so about that athlete as an individual. And so that's all what the first portion of this show is all about. The second portion of it, we're going to get into the X's and O's, nuts and bolts of being a skill and strength under one roof, one-stop shop for basketball players. You could apply the concepts to any athlete, but the second half is court athlete specific. And Bobby's going to get into his philosophy of the physical baseline, the base of that pyramid physically for what you need to play the game of basketball. He's going to get into specific KPIs and measures for what he wants to see out of players from a movement perspective, as well as building a base of movement before before the strength and before all those things come in and getting players to move well and properly. He's also going to talk about year-round basketball and over-specialization, and finally how some techniques that he utilizes to de-stress players in the realms of using breath work. And really, this whole show is it is a holistic performance show. There's so many elements from the full spectrum, the full circle of coaching that are in here, from how we interact with players, how we coach them in the weight room, how we coach them in skills. It's just a great full circle show, and I really have enjoyed my time talking with Bobby Whyte. Let's get on to episode 178. Bobby, it's awesome to have you on the show, man. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Joel.
Yeah, hey, I usually don't start off my shows with hey, well, I'm always trying to jump mid conversation, but I wanted to do this one formally because you are a person that I would love to just start this off by sharing or learning from you a little bit of your history and how you got into this where you are now in the sports world.
So I grew up. I was the only son. I had 6 sisters. From the time I can remember, my sisters always knew what they wanted to be when they grew up, and they became doctors, lawyers, very successful people. In my entire life, I was, what am I going to be? I had no idea, but I fell in love with sports at a young age. More looking back on it, it was the time I got to spend with my father, whether he was throwing me pitches on the baseball field or rebounding for me on the court. That was a time where I could be myself, be with my dad, and start building that, and just, be a kid and not be worrying about whatever else was going on in life and school and how, if I was, fitting in or not, and all the stuff we go through as we grow up. Sports for me was a way to spend time with my dad. It was a way to work on myself. And that's kind of how it started. And then I got older and I played everything. I played tennis. I was on the swim team. I played basketball. I played soccer. I ended up playing football. I did everything you could have met, karate. But I never specialized in anything, and I was mediocre at everything. I wasn't, I was never a superstar. I was never the best on the team. I was a very hard worker. I knew work ethic. I knew, I'd show up on time. My dad taught me to be the hardest worker on the team, and that was all great. But I struggled as an athlete because I never really I never developed the confidence. When I was with my dad and he was rebounding for me, I could make every shot I took. I could get into that flow state where I could just, I could just shoot the ball. I could not relax, but then something would happen where I'd get around my peers or in a high school environment, and I would tighten up. I would be worrying about making mistakes. I'd be doing that. So I never really put it all together. I ended up focusing on basketball when I got into high school, and then I went through some, injuries in high school. And I always wanted to be a Division I player. I didn't end up being a Division I player. I ended up being a Division III player. And I got up there. This is where kind of my story takes a drastic turn. When I was young, I was part of the youth group. I did things. I was a good kid. And somewhere along the line, it became more important to me to want to fit in. And I began drinking. And by the time I got to college, I was what I would call an experienced drinker. And, sports took a backseat to that. And while playing basketball I was in upstate New York at Utica College, I had a big injury my junior year where I had a herniated disc. And at that time in my life, I had no direction. I knew I liked basketball. I knew I liked working out, but I was kind of lost as a person. And when I got injured, I lost basketball, which was holding everything together, and I fell into the partying, and it got really bad. And it turned into, an opiate addiction, which I carried in for the next 3 years, and ended up, to speed the story up, I ended up stealing from people that loved me, my parents, my sisters, from anybody I could, because I was hurting. And it took some really bad stuff for me to happen. It took some really bad things happening to me to get me to a point where I had to ask for help. It got so bad that I couldn't admit what I had become. I had accomplished people in my family and this and that. And here I am, struggling and doing drugs every single day and stealing from people. And I was so scared of what would happen if people found out who I really was. So I ended up getting caught, and that was the best thing that ever happened to me. And that was, I had to tell you the date, it was November 18th, 2012, I got caught. And since that day, it's been almost 7 years that, I don't drink, I don't drug, I don't do anything. But that was just the first step, right? I got in a lot of trouble. I got caught. And now here I am at 24 years old. I didn't end up, I was in college for 5 years. I didn't graduate. I was, what am I going to do? And then I thought back to when I was in high school, and the last time I was happy was when I was, I was training. I had unbelievable trainers in high school, both on the court and in the weight room. And I thought back to, I was part of a youth group, and I was traveling around the country being of service to people and helping people out. I was like, the last time I was happy is when I was helping other people, when I was in the gym, when I remembered shooting the foul shots, or, batting practice with my dad, and the times where I could just like be myself. And I'm like, all right, let me reach out to my trainers. What do I have to do to do this? And I sent a heartfelt email to these guys that I kind of worship, that I looked up to, and they told me to get this certification, to do this. And for the first time in my life, I took that initial step, right, into that uncomfortability, right? And I took that step, and before I knew it, I'm certified with NASM. Then I go through all the FMS stuff, and then my trainer happened to be, my first boss happened to be with the New York Giants at that time. And then I'm in the Crest Diagnostic Center, part of an FMS team, going in there and screening the Giants. And I've got Odell Beckham and Eli Manning right next to me, and I'm a year sober. And I'm like, what is going on, right? And how did this happen? How did it happen was I had to be broken first. I had to realize that my way wasn't working, that all the years of insecurity through high school and growing up, it was all in my head. It wasn't true. It was all the stuff that I would tell myself. But I never really knew how to ask for help. I could ask for help, but I wasn't willing to take it. So what I learned was that I had to be honest with what I'm going through, with what I'm struggling with. And then the second I started asking for help, right, the second people started helping me and guiding me, and that I don't have to do everything alone. And I've kind of just taken that for the last 7 years now. And I do my best every single day when I wake up. So I talked about, kind of how I got into it. And then from there, I just kept I said yes a lot. If there was a new client coming in the gym originally, who wants this? I'd send an email back before anybody, I want one. And then before I knew it, I'm training 12 hours a day, and then it got too much, and then I'm crazy. But that's kind of, I guess, how it happens.
Man, that's a powerful story. And I think, we could probably spend the whole podcast just talking about your story too. I know it's as a training show, but it's really an incredible and inspirational road to where you're at. I think, myself, I'm a little non-traditional into how I got my job, but you are definitely on that, as non-traditional into the spectrum as it gets. And I, the most respect for what you've done and how you've gotten to that transition and how you got to where we are now. I think it's always so true. Things always happen for a reason, right? I love how you remember the date of that transformation in your own journey.
Yeah, it's a very important date. And I, as bad as my life was, I don't regret it, because it's turned me into the person that I am today. My ability to relate with people who struggle, right? And every athlete comes to me because they're struggling. And I don't know if they really know it in that sense, that they're coming to me because they're struggling, but they're coming to me to get better because they're not happy with their current situation, right? So whether it's a skill acquisition problem where they need to get better with the ball in their hand, or whether it's on the performance end of things where they need to get stronger and faster, they're coming in here because they're struggling in their sport. And I get struggle. There's one thing I understand. It's struggle. I've been through some, dark and scary stuff in my life, but I'm so grateful for it at this point, which is amazing, because at first it was, shame that, how could I become this? How could I do this? But now it's, thank God I went through that, because now I can really help kids, and I always talk about, I could care less if I create a really good So I'm training basketball players at this point. 99% of my athletes are basketball players, and I could care less if they become a really great basketball player if they don't like who they see in the morning when they look in the mirror. And I try to remind myself of that constantly. So before we, when I'm working with athletes, before we get into whether it's the performance side of things, we're getting them stronger, jumping higher, or whether we get into the skill work where we're teaching them how to shoot, dribble, move, all that kind of stuff, right? I want to look at the human first. I want to look at who that person is. I want to learn as much about what drives them. Why are they here? Who are they? And once I start to learn about these kids and who they are, it's not even kids at this point. It could be, guys trying to play professionally or whoever it is. The more I can learn about them, the more I can help. So that's what I do.
Dude, that is awesome stuff, man. I feel it reminds you a little bit about what Douglas Heel at a Be Activated clinic said. This was like 5 years ago, and this is universal. It wasn't just, this is a universal philosophy and knowledge, but the idea of you can only give to athletes what you have. And I think what you have is often a product of your struggles and overcoming those struggles. And so many of us, I think, so myself, I've had a pretty easy life, it's and it's almost in the sense like sometimes you that need to continually go inside and renovate. And it's I hear your story and I just think of how much power there is in your experiences, and that almost like that, like magnified that service, that heart of service, and that athletes get to experience that. That's awesome for your athletes now, and it's really such a cool story. I love how you said, just talk about the athlete first, because ironically that was the last podcast I released, is the human first, athlete second, and the sport athlete or sports specialist, basketball, football in the last one, but whatever your sport is third. And I think that's the dream, really, if all of coaching was of that mentality. Obviously we live in a growth economy. People, money's always going to be a thing, and success and all that. But I love how the method by which you quantify success, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah. So I play it before. Again, I'm talking about kind of how I go through training an athlete. Before we touch the gym, before we get in the gym, before we get on the court, before we even get there, I just want to sit down and talk, and I play a couple games to really get to know them, where long story short, I ask them, what's important to you about, let's say their goal is I want to score 20 points a game next year, right? That's where they come in. They tell me their goal is to score 20 points a game next year. And I go, what's important to you about that? They answer, I say, what's important to you about that? What's important? And the more I ask what's important to you, right, the more they get from surface level, 20 points a game or more eyes on me, more followers on Instagram. The more I ask what's important to you, the more they get to, soul level stuff, the stuff that's on the inside, the stuff that's really driving them. And once I can find out what's really driving them, well, I want to make my dad proud, or I want to get into a college so I can have a beautiful life. I want to be happy. I want to, and eventually it gets down to stuff like that. And once I find that stuff, I have the keys to them, where they come in and they're not giving me effort. They come in, or, they're falling off track. Give me a workout today that's going to make your dad proud. And what's that going to do to a high school athlete? Give me a workout today, right, that's going to make your mom proud. Or if it's one of my pro guys that dream of playing the NBA, give me a workout today that's going to set your family up for the rest of their lives. And what does that do? Oh, okay, let's go. No matter what they went through that day, if their girlfriend broke up with them, whatever it is, right? Okay, I got them present now. Now they know why they're here. And it's so much more important. I could have the best program in the world, right? Which I don't know. I put a lot of time in this. I read, I learn, I go to different certifications. I do this, I get on the court. I surround myself with the smartest people I know, where I feel dumb, because that's how I know that's what makes me feel better. But I could have all of this knowledge and put it into the best program in the world. But if they're not excited to be there, if they don't want to be there, if they don't know why they're there, it doesn't matter, because they're not going to do it.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Intention is everything. Yeah. If you don't have that burning desire to be good and the intention, then that's always the first brick. It's always the first brick, no doubt. I know. So I would like to shift a little bit into both this. I know we talked about before, like a pyramid. You talked about a pyramid of building a player. And I know too that you, so I guess we can take this a few ways, but I know that, well, one thing that is unique to you that we've shared a lot of conversation with was the benefits of keeping skill and strength in one umbrella. Like you being a one-stop shop for basketball, doing their skill work and their strength work. And I think there's more and more emergent coaches in all areas of the field who are doing that thing. And so could you chat a little bit, I guess first, share with me, based off what we've just been talking about, your the pyramid of what builds an athlete, and then maybe we can get into some of the skill and strength combinations.
All right. So if we're looking at the athlete as a pyramid, at the bottom, you can start with breath if you want to. At the bottom, right, we're breathing, we're a living organism, right? Above that is how we move, we bend, we squat, we rotate, we push, we pull. We all know that, right? So we've got to look, are we moving okay? Up from that, we're going into performance, right? We're looking at, I don't know, reactivity, vertical jump, explosiveness, change of direction, whatever. That we've got performance, right? Above that, we've got nutrition, sleep. What are you putting into your body? Are you taking care of your body? Above that, you've got things like coachability, work ethic, kind of that realm. The top part of that pyramid is the skill, right? And what I've found by keeping that intact, they need all of it, right? If I'm a basketball player, right, I need to have the performance. I need to move well. I need to put the right things in my body. I need to work on all of it from the ground up. You take any of that out, the pyramid starts to crumble, right? So what happens now, right? We've got skill guys, we've got performance guys, we've got nutritionists, we've got PTs, we've got breathing guys, we've got all these different guys out there, all these different guys putting different information out there. Imagine being a kid today with all the information out there and trying to figure out, right, what the heck am I supposed to do? Do I need yoga? Do I need this? Do I need what? So what I've done is put that whole pyramid in one location. Now, they can come there and they can work on their bodies. They can work on their skill. And time is always a factor. They're going to this guy, they got practice here, this here, this here. And now by putting it all under one roof, right, I've simplified it. I've streamlined it. And I continue to try to, now I've got that kind of figured out, right? I have a whole bunch of things I haven't figured out, but I've kind of streamlined this approach to training basketball players where they can come to one spot and get hopefully everything they need to get to the next level wherever they want to go.
You're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast, brought to you by Simply Faster. Yeah, 100%. And so in terms of keeping skill and strength in one, I think it definitely could be a lot more efficient because with any organization, the more minds, the more people, the more disorganized it can get. So obviously, even in those places where it's a separate silo, if there's good communication, obviously that it can be very efficient. But I think that it's always good to talk to people who are doing work on both sides of those things. So what is a typical what is a typical training week or I guess even day tend to look for you working with your players when their first emphasis or their primary emphasis is becoming better at basketball? And obviously you have that human element, asking them and what's their inner drive, but they're there to get better at the game. And so how does that look? How does that shake out when you're actually working with them on a daily basis?
So, they can sign up for once a week or twice a week or whatever it is, but I've got it staggered. So I don't call people beginners, intermediate, and advanced anymore because it seems to frustrate parents that they don't want their kid to be in a beginner class or vice versa. So I've got level 1, level 2, level 3, right? And I get to decide what level you are, right? But I've got it staggered. So let's say I'm doing everything semi-privately or small group on the court. The strength stuff is all semi-private, where I have it set up where they can come in and get their strength work in at 5 and then go immediately onto the court at 6. So they're coming for 2 hours and they come in and they're going through, when they first come in, they're going through their mobility stuff or their warm-up stuff, and we get them into their program, whatever their lifting program is. They're done. I try to give them 5-10 minutes at the end to breathe, to calm down, to, recover a little bit. And then they're going on the court for the next hour with another trainer. And they come in and they're getting something that they can't do anywhere else. And at first I was kind of, well, what are you? Are you a skill guy? Are you a strength guy? Well, if you're a skill guy, you can't be that good of a strength guy. Or if you're a strength guy, you can't be that good of a skill guy. Right. And I'm like, all right, well, I believe in myself, so I'm going to keep doing this. But now I've set myself apart 7 years later, overnight, 7 years later, now I've set myself apart. We're in my area, New Jersey, that if, you want to get better at basketball and stronger, I'm your guy. And I just continue to try to make it as streamlined and seamless as possible, and that's it, I guess. Yeah.
So with the strength work, particularly, this is something I'm always thinking of is, um, because you're doing all the skill work and you're seeing so much through that. Does your strength work become more? I'm not sure how to frame this question, but here's what I'm trying to say is your strength work just extremely general? You're not really trying to be specific with things towards basketball and strength work, or are you trying to find some specificity in the weight work in what you do?
Yeah. The specificity comes in, the specificity of the court comes into play with mostly of the skill work. But in the sport of basketball, they are jumping, they are cutting, they are changing directions, they are breaking down. A lot of them are playing, like I said, 5 games on the weekend. They're on 6 different teams going this, where they're constantly jumping, they're constantly moving, they're constantly doing that. So a lot of, what do they need? And that's what I ask myself every day. What is the best? Do I need to do a ton of plyos with these kids? Depends on, that could depend on who's in front of me. But, they need a baseline of strength. A lot of these kids are incredible basketball players, but you put them in a weight room environment and they're fish out of water. They've got no control, right? So I'm always focused on the movement first, right? Can they own the positions, right? Are they stable on one foot, right? Do they decelerate properly? Can they get to the right positions that are going to carry over the sport? Did I answer that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. So in regards to your actual, and that's kind of like I thought. So because your strength program or because you're always around the skills and they're always playing and they're always doing specific stuff through play or skills, the weight room is a little bit more general in nature, like the lifts and the things like that. But then you want to see if they can do a few, and that's what I wanted to get into too, is some of the main key performance indicators for various skills. But then there are, in the context of, I guess, the gym or the weight room, if you will, there's a few key physical qualities that you do need them to be able to do, like you said, like decelerating or working on one leg.
Yeah. So I guess I'd have to start with my process of, all right, so we got them out of that initial meeting, finding out who they are. Now I want to find out who they are as an athlete, right? And that's why it's kind of a player by player basis that I have to look at it. What does this player need? What does this player need? So if I come in, I can bring it through an FMS. I can look at their, different movement patterns, take that for what it is, right? But then I can take them into performance testing, which I've recently got into the functional capacity screen, which allows me to look at motor control, that allows me to look at postural control, explosive control, and impact control. And then from there, I'm going to get a whole blueprint of what this athlete really needs. Now, I come in a lot of times, these kids come in, they're banged up, their backs hurt, their knees hurt. So I'm looking at their ankles, before I'm even trying to get them to jump higher or be more explosive, right? Are their joints doing what their joints are supposed to do? Is their ankle doing what their ankle is supposed to do? Can they stand on one foot? Do they have proper motor control? Do they have these things? And then I kind of just go up the ladder.
Yeah. So that actually brings me to it. Maybe before we talk about like the movement key performance indicators, and this is where I think there's a strong area of controversy, is the FMS. And I'm sure some people heard you say FMS earlier in the show, and they're like, it always, I think it always elicits a particular response from people, especially, given the research or how you can look at movement screens or things like that. But I know that you have a very in-depth look at that, and obviously you're a guy who's always connecting it to the skills and the outputs and how that pyramid all works together. So could you share your experience and thoughts on movement screens, purpose, how you utilize them, and how that fits into your system?
Yeah, I think it's taken for what it's not supposed to be, right? I think people will, they're looking at the reports coming out that it's not doing anything in terms of injury prevention or this or that, or, there's no real, they're trying to put numbers to how effective it is in terms of an injury prevention tool, right? But I'm just using it for what it is. I'm gonna look at his squat. Can he squat? No, or he's a 1 in his squat. So I'm just taking mental notes, or I'm taking actual physical notes, writing all this down. And he comes in. I'm not looking for, everyone knows it's out of 21. I'm not looking to get this kid. My goal is not to get him to a 21. My goal is to get him better at his sport, right? And I always have to think that. So if I know if he can't achieve a proper depth on his squat, or if his leg raise is a 1, or he's got shoulder, mobility issues where he's a 3-1, or he's got these big deficiencies or asymmetries, right? That's just stuff I want to take notes of. Do any of these movements cause pain, right? All right, he comes in, he squat, my back hurts, my knees. All right, these are just things that I'm getting information that I could, yes, it's objective, right? I know everything. Yes, it's objective. 2 people could screen and get different scores. But for me, it helps me just create a blueprint of the athlete, right? And then because of all this controversy, what does that do? I'm not going to take a side. I'm going to look at the other side. So that's why I went out and I went through FRC and the functional range conditioning and all of that. So now I'm learning about, controlled articular rotations and this and that. And now instead of looking at patterns and movements, I can look at joints. Is the ankle doing what the ankle's supposed to do? Is the shoulder? And I can start, and it's confusing, right? I study this. I learn about this all the time. And I'm just, how can I put this into an hour session? How can I put this into a program? Right. And I just use it all together as a tool. And it's just putting different tools in my tool bag. Right. So now, we can look at patterns, right? More of global movement. And then I can also look at joint function. Is this joint doing what it's supposed to do? Right. The better I can prepare, we can't possibly, one of my favorite things to say, we can't train every single movement in the weight room that you're going to have to do on the basketball court, but we can do our best, right, to get your joints to be able to do. We can't train every movement, right, in a weight room. Right? You're going to squat, I don't know, an infinite amount of ways in the game of basketball. You're going to lunge in different directions. It's not purely linear. It's not purely, sagittal. There's all these different variabilities that go into the movement when we play the game of sport. But are your joints, the more range of motion and active control we can give you, right, the more positions you're going to be safe in, right? And it just gives me more information. It gives me a better blueprint. It gives me a better picture in my head of what I want to do with this athlete to get him to his goal.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's nothing ever bad with it. Like you said, athletic movement is so insanely complex. And I think at some point, any coach needs to find some sort of scaled down way just to observe movement. Whether you put a number on it or not, I think what strength coach doesn't get great information by watching an athlete do a squat or an overhead squat, whether it's part of a system or not. It's all really, it's important information in the system, or if you can do things with pain or without. So, I think that it all works its way into our own thought processes, whatever, and in reducing things. And I like what you said about, you can never do all the movements in the weight room. I think sometimes maybe we kind of act like we do when we do like a lateral lunge or something like that, or lateral step. But it's like, this isn't even close. Like this is a shade of the possibilities of what you're actually going to be getting in sport. We're really nowhere near it with what we're actually achieving in the weight room.
Right. The more I don't know. I like it because I like being able to have things on paper. I like being able to, all right, we're here and we want to get here. The more information I can get on these guys that it kind of makes sense, that have some type of structure, the more structure that I can get, right, on them, the more I can end up doing, and the more I, again, get to learn about them and who they are as athletes. And then it allows me to, get more focus on what they need. If this kid comes in and he squat, boom, boom, beautiful squat, good, leg raise, 3, good, this, that. All right, you're good. We got to lift. We got to get you moving, right? Or if I have a kid come in that can't do any of that, all right, we need to spend some more time on how you move. And then we'll get you, maybe some weights in your hands down the road.
Yeah, for sure. Using it there's always different needs for different athletes. And I think the ability to put numbers, I think we tend to look at systems fairly critically, but just the idea that how are you showing progress? And whatever you're screening, whatever you think is worthy of improving, how are you showing progress in that? Or how are you indicating if you think it's valuable to improve, like having some sort of system or number or something behind it. I think that's definitely something that has some power to it.
Yeah, and even getting a kid come in or an athlete to come in on his first day and he can't touch his toes, and a week later he's touching his toes. That's creating buy-in. We got him to do something that he couldn't do. Whether it's something standing on one foot and doing a single leg toe touch, and just doing these things that look, you're trying to play, Division I basketball, but you can't stand on one foot. That gives me something.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the 1 foot standing stuff is so illuminating too. Like doing in my time with Dr. Tommy John, just doing like standing hip circles and a number of each. We're staying on one leg, and the other leg you're doing circles with the other foot in 3 different directions, and just how many people start getting just so utterly fatigued in the arch of their foot or their shin in a very short period of time. It shows that there's some muscles that are not either they're not doing their job correctly, and you wonder, well, how did you get to this point where you play this sport, but you can't, this is so hard for you, you know?
Yeah. I watch a kid come into a 360 windmill, and then I bring him outside, take his shoes off, and tell him to touch his toe, and he falls down. Like, what?
Oh, man.
And I see it all the time. This isn't like uncommon. I get great basketball players, and you put them into situations that we would think are no-brainer situations, and they can't do it. Can you hold a split hold? Can you get to a good depth? And, can you look good in a split hold? And I put them in a split, they get down there and they're falling over, they're wobbling. It's I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, it's amazing. I look at like too, it's like almost, well, if you're doing a 360 windmill, you certainly have to have a lot of qualities in the sagittal, frontal, and transverse plane to pull that off. So but I mean, even those athletes, I'm sure, have areas that they are lacking in or haven't developed in, or if they haven't been doing that many other sports or anything like that.
But now that kid, I'll come in and he'll be a 9 on his FMS. Does that mean he's what is that? He's a 9 out of 21 on his FMS, but he can do a 360 windmill and is a top 20 player in the country. The FMS isn't a perform. Am I going to use that to judge this athlete? No, it's just one tool that I can. Okay, so he's not good here. We can make this better, and maybe getting him to move better, right? With this, right? That's just going to give me. It's going to give me more information on him that I wouldn't have had if I didn't have some type of structure assessment. And what else are you doing? If you're not doing that, what are you doing? Do you have a system? Is there a way to what are you doing if you're not doing some type of movement assessment?
Yeah, that reminds me a little bit too. Yeah, you said that, and LeBron James getting that bad score on the
we got 11, right?
Yeah, same. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, it must have been an 11. So yeah, kind of same thing. But like you said, it's information that you didn't have before about that person, and I'm sure if you see that long enough, like you can start to formulate trends, and your intuition can start to formulate trends on different people or different patterns and things like that. Just having more information. So I did want to get into, since you have it under one roof, one shop, so to speak, some of the main KPIs or key performance indicators you're looking for in regards to various basketball skills. And I think this could be a really long talk, but what are the main, so could you just get into, and maybe this can kind of illuminate some of your teaching process and what you're doing, but could you get into some of the main movements that you're trying to allow athletes to be better in? How you're teaching and working with that. Perhaps, and I don't want to make this too many questions, I have a tendency to do that, but perhaps we can also work in like the perception and reaction component, or how you allowing them to be better decision makers. But perhaps let's just start with just key movements you're trying to get them to be really good at in the sport of basketball.
All right. What do we want them to be able to do well, right? And I've asked, these are 2 of the top coaches in the state of New Jersey that coach teams that are that play national schedules. And at one point I asked them 5 athletic attributes to improve on, right, within your athletes. Now, these are high school coaches that coach 2 of the best teams in New Jersey. The first coach says agility, speed, explosiveness, lean mass, flexibility. The second coach says explosiveness, natural movement, quick jump allowing for a second jump, core strength, playing with a lower, better base, right? So so my question for them is, all right, so what are you doing to work on that? And I look at their practices and what they're spending all their time on, and it's not that, right? They might think it's that, but it's not. So that's a whole nother topic. But as I already said, my best basketball players are not my best lifters. They're not my best guys in the weight room, right? I want you to be able to control your movement, right? So initially I'm starting with, let's get them through some cars. Can we focus and try to just give them more control over their bodies, whether it's, shoulders, hips, leg? Can they stand on one foot, right? Are they stable, right? Are they going to be able to use their explosiveness safely, right? Or do they not have control, right? So I'm just, whatever the workouts are, I don't think there's much like, is it squatting? Is it single leg work? Is it pushing? Is it pulling? Is it this? Or am I looking for exact numbers in that? No, but let's get him a good base of strength first. Let's do some GPP, right? How does this push up look? How does he, how does he perform under load? Let's get him some loaded carries. Is he breaking down? Can he move well? Can he hold things? Is he stable? Is that kind of stuff? And that's from just, I guess now 6 years of watching this and progressing. It's basic stuff. I do a lot of, really slow. I love slow eccentrics, controlled negatives, teaching them how to like load and absorb and, have soft knees and do all that type of stuff. But I'm not, can he bench 300 pounds? I don't care. Can he squat 600 pounds? No. How does it look when he does it? Does he look athletic? Does he look stable? Does he look strong? Yeah, I guess.
You're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast, brought to you by Simply Faster. Yeah, so with in terms of like on the court itself though, for example, like play like anything. Is there anything you're trying to achieve? And this was a podcast that we just released in terms of. And maybe because this is probably fresh on my head because of this, and this is probably why I'm asking it. But for example, when an athlete is going by a defender, or if they're doing certain movements on defense or offense, or is there any certain movements on the court that you have any sort of this might work into like the self-organization, like here's the objective, get around this guy, and they're just going to organize the movement the best way they can with the physical tools they can. So maybe I'll start here. Do you have any sort of set series on basic ways to do drills in the world of basketball, like footwork, basic important, like I guess you could get into, and I've talked about this, what's more important, but getting into like shin angles or where you're placing your feet or how you're going by a defender, any of that stuff, is any of that stuff present? I mean, that would be a better way to ask.
Yes.
Versus just saying, okay, here's the problem and solve it. And then let's use the general physical, like you were just talking about, to enhance the whole system.
Yeah. Again, let's go from the ground up. When we're young and we start dribbling a basketball, generally the first thing we want to do is put the basketball through our legs, right? Was that your experience?
Yeah, I was horrible at dribbling, but I did want to do all the tricks. Like I wanted to do like the spider and all these things. Yeah. So yes, I would say yes.
So we want to put the ball through our legs, but at a young age, we're not capable of doing that. What we do is we lift our leg up and we kind of throw the ball underneath our leg, right? So we're moving our body around the implement or the ball, right? But basketball, we want to be able to control. We don't want to be able to move our body around the ball. We want to be able to have control of the ball around our body. So we learn from a young age kind of backwards, right? So I've got to kind of rewire that. So I start with simple stuff with timing, where we're just going to walk, and I want you to, like, you're walking through the park without a ball in your hand, but I want you to also work on timing, where every time you dribble with your right hand, when that ball hits the ground, I don't know if you can picture this, when that ball hits the ground, your left foot is hitting the ground, right? Right. So now when I do it, it looks simple because I've done it for a long time, but you're walking in a straight line and the ball hits the ground when your left foot hits the ground, and you just keep that rhythm. And now you're building rhythm. But what happens is they start to walk like, Walking Dead zombies, right? They're strict. They can't keep that timing and also keep a natural state, right? A natural, like you're walking in a park, right? So we just work on that. And now we're learning how to time. We're learning, because if you look at the best basketball players, right, watch their timing. Generally, when that ball's coming down, their opposite foot is hitting the ground at the same time. And that has a lot of benefits that I won't get into. But from there, all right, now can we walk naturally, right? and put the ball through our legs and just start building it up. All right, so now we're walking, the ball's moving, they look comfortable. They don't look like they're, stressing or off balance or, zombie like in their movements, right? They're walking. All right, now they're starting to build comfort with the ball. And we do that from there. Now, knowing what I know from the performance side, right? Let's get them into skipping, right? Some contralateral where they're skipping with a basketball in their hand, right? And once we can start to do that, the ball becomes an extension of our body, and our body's doing athletic things, moving the ball around us rather than moving our body around the ball or trying to adapt to the ball. The ball it's becoming in tune with us as movers, as athletes, right? And now we start to show actual real control where I can be an athlete and I'm not strict. And then from there, we just build up. All right. So we call it getting into that split position, right? Whether you put the ball through your legs or you get into that split position, you call it a plyo step or a false step where your back foot is going back, right? Are they stable in that position? Which I can see if I'm trying to drive by somebody, right? I want to be able to generate downhill momentum. We call it in the basketball world. We want to get downhill, right? We can do that when our foot goes back. We drive our foot into the ground. We would in track, you call it a plyo step or whatever, right? Call it a plyo step. But here we're going to call it a drop, and we're teaching them how to generate that downhill momentum, right? Where if I can get them just that simple timing of where I'm splitting my feet, but the back foot is hitting before the front foot. Watch somebody beat somebody off the dribble, right? Their back foot is going to be hitting the ground a split second before their front foot, and they're going to be getting downhill. So that's what I'm looking for. And I just build on that, and we would keep challenging the footwork. I try not to overcue. I want them to be able to self-organize. I have players that are great with cones and med balls or whatever tools we're doing, but then we put them in a game and they melt down. So I'm trying to keep them at the edge of their ability. I'm trying to, just if I'm seeing something that's off, if I'm seeing that they're not able to generate the momentum the way they should, if they're not able to move the way they should, I'm going to highlight it. I'm not going to stress it, but I'm going to highlight it. Hey, try this, do this, right? And just get them to be able to put themselves in more athletic positions that open up more options for them when they play, right? Basketball isn't a thinking game, it's a reacting game, right? We're not thinking when we play. We want to get into that flow state where we're just playing, we're just moving, we're just reacting to what the defense gives us, and we're not thinking about or internalizing all the different movements, because it's a very, very complex game. And if you start to think about, let's take a jump shot, the worst thing you do with a jump shot, to work with trying to teach somebody or correct a faulty jump shot is so hard, because the last thing you want to do when you shoot a basketball is think about your form, right? So if you have bad form, how do we take them from that? If you want to go from the spectrum of unconscious incompetence to conscious or to unconscious competence, right? We go, what's the best way to do that? And I'm kind of, I don't have it down yet. It's not perfect, but I have found ways to, to not overly cue, allow them to self-organize, and just by getting them in the right positions to be athletic.
Yeah, I like what you said. Well, a few things that you said I thought were really cool. Was the first is just the timing and the timing of the dribbling. And if we talk about athletic movement, especially on offense, it's impossible to separate from timing of at least dribbling, unless you're not I guess maybe if you're not so much a dribbling player, maybe there's some differences there. But it brought me back to what Adarian Barr was saying at the first Rewire clinic we did like a year and a half ago, maybe almost 2 years ago. And he was talking about that same thing, like when the timing of a player dribbling corresponding with that foot coming down. And it's such a basic, simple thing, but there's still so much. I'm sure if you watch a player at high speed on the court where they're doing more things, it's a simple thing at heart. And Kevin Foster, who's been on the show a lot, has said this, like nothing in sport is really that terribly complicated. The positions are pretty simple. It's just the timing that you get to those positions, and all the little subtle joint manipulations are the things that are really complex to it all. And it's just, to me, it's always interesting too what gets attention on social media, because we live in an attention-based society. And it's like, the timing stuff is never going to get that much attention, but that's the most important thing probably. The stuff that gets attention is the stuff that looks bigger and crazier and gives this thought as if there's something else out there that you don't know or we don't know. And yeah, there is a lot, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of it just comes down to doing the simple things a lot better. And I like how you start with that timing drill.
And then another big one that if I say that the universal basketball stance, right? It's on defense, it's on offense. You watch Kyrie break somebody down, how far his feet are, like how wide of a base and how stable of a base that he has, right? When he's attacking somebody off the dribble, how wide and stable he is. So my first step with getting them to be able to move wide and stable is just can we get in that wide athletic stance, right? And what happens in most middle school teams, high school teams in America, you have coaches yelling at players to get lower, play lower. Little Johnny can't. You think he's not trying? He doesn't possess the stability or coordination or whatever it is to get lower. And so you yelling louder is not going to get him to play lower, right? So that's where it comes. All right, now we might have to take him in the weight room, get him a little bit stronger. Stability issue, work stability. If it's a single, whatever it is, we'll get him stronger and more stable. But yelling at them to get wider and low, so I want you to get a little wider than you're comfortable being right now. I want you to get down, chest proud, and now let's just keep them in that position. And what are we doing? We're doing isometric hold, right? Now we can work some, dribbling into that, whether, whatever we're doing with the ball, doesn't really matter. But let's get him to hold that position to the best of his ability, not yell at him to get lower and lower. Just get a little bit wider and let's hold that position. And just stay with that. And we're going to do that every time you come in the door. We're going to get you in that wide, low basketball stance. And sooner than later, you're going to be moving and going through your legs and, driving by people in that wide and low stance.
Yeah, 100%. That is one thing that there's always that kind of split in the sense of, okay, there is some things that you have to work on the skill itself to get better at, but then there's some things that you almost just have to get, the general abilities just have to get better before it's going to happen. Yeah, like playing better defense, or probably things like internal rotation of the femur to possess various agility qualities, like Pat Trainer's baseball minor league strength coach had said in a previous episode. So there's certain things that you're not going to get playing the game itself that you have to get better at. And that is, I've never been to that situation, but I can just picture it in my head, parents telling kids to do certain things that they just can't. And I've seen this even with youth track and field too. Like there's all the cues in the world I've seen coaches give kids to do, but I'm like, well, number one, I don't know how good that cue is in the first place. And number two, that kid doesn't possess the physical-qualities needed to execute what you're saying. So it's kind of like a double, it's a 2-for-1, like this isn't going to work. And then you think about too, like the judgment in that kid's head now too, because he's being told to do something and he just can't do it, versus, that's almost the nice thing about the non-specific is you just go and get stronger and be able to move better in a gym setting, a weight room setting. And a lot of these things will start to transfer over organically, and maybe you never even had to know. You'll just start feeling better in your low position. And I think that's always a good trade-off. I want to close a couple just quick questions on the way out here, but I know you had mentioned before, Bobby, that a lot of athletes, and this is something I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how we can get away from this, but basketball players who it's just year round. It never stops. It never stops. And I think there's enough attention that's starting to come out in the media. And I remember even hearing a really cool story about like Zion Williamson's mom and restricting his time and things like that. So it's like, for career longevity but it's such a hard thing. But your thoughts on people playing year-round basketball and early specialization and all those things, and how does that fit in with what you're doing with your athletes?
It's a huge problem with what's going on in basketball right now. These kids are playing 12 months out of the year, and not just playing 1 or 2 games 12 months out of the year. They're going into their AAU seasons where they're playing 5, possibly 6 games in a 2-day span, right? Their main basketball season is winter. Winter ends, they go right to AAU season. Spring AAU, spring in basketball world, right, ends up going all the way through summer, right? So spring AAU goes into July, and then before they know it, they're back at school in September. They're on 2 fall league teams for their high school, and then they're getting ready for winter. And, with the snap of the finger, they just played basketball for 12 months. Where you look at sports like football, they play in the fall, and the whole other 3 quarters of the year, they're training for their sport. They're lifting, right? They're getting stronger. They're working on their bodies where then they can go be at their best for the football season. Where in the basketball year, right, are you working on your skill? Where in the basketball year are you working on your strength, right? Where there's not many LeBron Jameses out there that are just freak athletes, right? That are Zion Williams. Is he great at basketball because he spent hours in a weight room working on his? No, he's had a 35-inch standing vert. That's just who he is, right? We're not all like that. I wasn't like that. I've had to put in a ton of time in a weight, but they see these top athletes playing all year round, so they think they need to play all year round, or they need the exposure, right? But okay, you're getting exposure, but right now what you're really getting is exposed because you haven't put the time in working on your craft and body and skill, right? There needs to be a shift because right now you're going to get burnt out, you're going to get injured, you're not spending any time, one, being a kid, being an athlete, right? Learning other things other than basketball.
Yeah, it's a tough problem, and you wonder the best way to eventually get it turned around. I know that I mean, for me in my youth, and I'm sure you as well, like the difference between sports was a break on so many levels. I wouldn't have been the athlete I was if I was if I was playing basketball 12 months out of the year. I mean, I think there was always like the screwing around, play 21, play pickup element that existed year round, which is the fun, the non-pressure element that existed. But yeah, it's a tough situation for young athletes for sure, and it's something that I'm passionate about, finding the road to hopefully finding remedies for that down the road.
I think this is the start of it. We just talk about it. This is a problem, and I think just by bringing that problem up and talking about it, and more people being on that page, what can be done. It'll start to be done, and people will start to see the value of taking a break. And, maybe, all right, this season we're not going to play you, but you're going to play pickup a couple of days a week, right? You're still going to get a ball in your hand, or let's play more one-on-one or two-on-two where you have the ball in your hand more, where you can, where it's not as up and down 94 feet, where you're in a half court setting. And then, your focus right now should be getting stronger. And if more people start to do that, we'll see the change.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, to have those shifts and bring up those conversations is really important. One last thing that I wanted to ask you, and you mentioned this right before we started talking for the actual recording, but how are you using breathing and breath work? Because that I do think fitting in with these athletes who are playing the same thing all the time. There's a lot of pressure and stress and all these things that exist. I know I've always found breath work to be a helpful tool. How do you utilize that in your own training, in your own space?
I'll use an example that in a couple hours, I'll be driving into Jersey City here, and I work with a high school in Jersey City that should be one of the top teams in the state this year. And I go in there, I get into Jersey City at 2:30. These kids are getting out of school, and they have 4 minutes from the time the last period ends, right, to get into the weight room and get ready. So it's always a scramble, and they're in there, they're in their school mode where they're talking, they're this and that, they're loud, they're boisterous, they're all that kind of stuff. And before anything else, right, hey, everybody lay down. All right, take your shoes off, lay down. Now they're thinking, most people would come in as a strength coach and try to kill them. And, let's get the weights out. Let's get this. Let's do this. Let's amp them up. Let's get, real fight or flight on you. Let's do all this. And I bring them in, and I'm like, all right. And this is an urban neighborhood, right? And we get them in, lay on your backs, fold your fingers, put them on your stomach, inhale through your nose, fill your belly up with air. You should feel your hands rising to the ceiling. You should feel your belly rising into your hands. Let's get a 4-second inhale, and let's see if we can get an 8-second exhale. And I start counting, right? And some days I do it for 2 minutes. Some days I do it for 10 minutes based on how I feel it's going, right? And then these kids are coming in. They're worried about homework. They're worried about girls. They're worried about this. They're worried about that. And now I can take 10 minutes of silence. Hopefully we get, 5 minutes of silence, whatever it is, where all they're doing is becoming in tune with themselves, where they're focused on their breath. And they don't know it. They don't think of it how I'm thinking of it, with getting them into the present, getting them in tune with their bodies, doing all this, calming them down, getting all these, outside distractions out of their head. But that's what's happening. And after some days it's 3 minutes, some days it's 5 minutes. I went 10 minutes once with these kids. 3 of them fell asleep, right? These kids' schedules are crazy. They go to school for 6 to 8 hours a day. They have 2 hours of homework, and they're trying to play professional basketball someday. Giving them 5 minutes to just breathe, to just be present, is amazing. And and then, hey, stand up slowly. And then I have them introduce themselves. Hey, I'm whoever from, Newark, I'm here, right? And then we start slow. And I start with some cars, right? Now we got them calm down where they're capable of focusing, right? Teaching cars to high school athletes is not very easy because it takes a lot of focus. It takes irritating. It's hard for me to do. And I've been practicing it now for years, right? But now after that breath work where we got them down, at least they can try to focus, right? And then we're doing these slow things. And then I start to explain to them, if I can get you to focus on your body, right? And drown out all that noise, this is going to carry over to overtime games when the crowd is going nuts, when your coach is yelling at you, when you're, all this pressure is stacked against you. Can you stay calm? Can you stay present? Can you put yourself and not be worried about making mistakes? Can you just focus, right? And all that goes into it. And it's just being able to, I don't know, I'm always amazed, like, do I want to do this today? Do I want to have these kids breathe for 5 minutes? It's kind of boring, but then I do it. I'm like, thank God I did that, because now these kids can listen to me. And that's cool.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The more I do that type of work, especially in, I think this day and age, you have so many levels of stressors, and now even more so the social media and electronic end is amplified. And kids, everybody needs that stuff. It's one of the books on my reading list is Ryan Holiday's most recent is, I think it's Stillness is the Key or Silence is the Key, and just talking about how a lot of the greatest minds and leaders in the world, the commonality is like you have to take that time to be silent and be still. And yet we live in a world that really doesn't facilitate that at all, or really prioritize or say that this is an important thing or something to be respected to do that. It's just hustle and grind. And I've found that for me, like personally and with my groups, like I'm always I'm always just completely and utterly blown away by the response to doing breathing work from the athletes, by how much they enjoy and they appreciate it. And it's really phenomenal. It always makes me want to do more of that. And then just even in my own life and work, I'm a better coach when I do that stuff before the coaching session by far. If I do meditation in the morning, I'm a much better coach than if I don't. And it's a critical part of it all.
It's so funny you just said that. The amount of athletes I have now that like finish up their workout 10 minutes early. Bobby, can I breathe? Yeah, go. Yeah, you can breathe. Go lay on the turf and breathe for 10 minutes before you get on the court. Please go breathe. Yeah. But like, it's not done enough. Like, why? We're both talking about the benefits of it and how amazing it is just to be still and breathe. But in the performance world, in the basketball world, when is everybody talking about, being calm and breathing? It's all about, excitement. It's all about jumping higher. It's all about this and that. When athletes need that, they need to breathe. They need to be able to just be, and that's where I find when I'm relaxed, when I focus on my breath, when I'm, more diligent with that kind of down regulation, when I step on the court, because I still like to play and I do it, I'm not stressed out. I'm lighter. I'm, more of that flow state where the basket looks the size of the ocean. That's what I get. I've gotten into it at some points in my life, when I was playing very competitively, where there's no thought, there's no thinking. It's just, pull the trigger, hit the three, man up on defense, get down to, and that's where I'm trying to get these guys to be. And I'm going to keep doing my best.
Yeah. It's something that I think fits in with an athlete on multiple like holistic levels too. I think it's really important. And so I'm glad we could talk about that at the end of the show today. So, but I think that's all the questions for the day, Bobby. Thank you so much for your time, and really appreciate you being on, telling your story, sharing your process and insight with all of us today. So thanks again, man.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us for another show. We appreciate you guys listening. If you enjoy what we're doing, you can support us by heading to iTunes, Stitcher, leaving us a rating or review. We'd really appreciate it. As always, support our sponsor, simplyfaster.com, suppliers of high-end training technology, They have the best of in each category of sports performance metrics, tracking data. They have force plates, contact grids, K-Box, gym wear, training tools, EMS. So make sure you check them out, as well as their blog and what they're doing. They've been such an awesome supporter of us. All right, that does it for this show. We'll see you guys back next week with another great guest.